Hey everybody, Gina DeLuca here. All right, as you can see, I am set up for a straight board. I have already covered my edges. I do that because my straight pours are mixed relatively thinly, and I don't want to risk not getting coverage on the sides of my canvas. And so I always, well, not always, sometimes I forget. But yeah, so I usually cover the edges first. The colors that we're going for today, going for some drama here. So I have Liquitex Basics in Mars Black, DecoArt Americana Decor Metallics in 24 karat gold, and in copper. The DecoArt Americana Decor line is fantastic for creating cells, and they work really well in tandem with the Liquitex Basics line. Not all of the colors. Opaque colors work best as the background for a straight pour. If I were using something that were more transparent, I would not get the exact kind of reaction. So I use an opaque paint for my background color, which is going to be the same color as my base coat. The consistency that we're working with. This is about a 2.5, a 2 to a 2.5 on my consistency scale. It is making a mound on a mound, but it disappears pretty quickly. If I were using paints that were not metallic, I could actually go thinner. I could go to a 1, but because I'm using metallics, you can't go thinner than that if you want the those boulder cells, if you want those colors to stay intact. If you go too thin with the metallics, you will wind up with a sheen. The mica will separate from the paint and kind of float on top, which can be a cool effect, but that's not what we're going for. These paints have been mixed 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol. And then that mixture is then thinned with my concoction of 90% water, 10% Floetrol, until I get the consistency that I'm looking for, which you just saw. Before we get started, have you seen the Fluid Art inspiration cards? If you have, you can fast forward about a minute. But if you have not, what we have are 52 cards. There are 42 technique cards. Each technique card has an associated video here on YouTube that gives you all of the information that you need, the exact paint colors that I used, the consistency, the pouring medium, and all of that. All of that stuff would not fit on one of these cards. So this picture here is of the painting that is in that video. This box here contains a tip for that particular technique. And here at the bottom, you have the color palette that I used in that particular painting. There are also 8 bonus color palette cards. Each one has 5 color palettes. Use all of the colors or just some of the colors. Mix and match the color palette cards with the technique cards, and you have more combinations than you could ever paint in a lifetime. And these are available at my website, ginadeluca.net, and also on Amazon.com. And if you get them from Amazon, please do leave feedback. They are super sticklers for the algorithms over there, and feedback is a huge part of it. Okay, I am going to do this a little differently than I usually do. Typically, I would have 3 of these colors of some kind of cell maker, or 2 cell makers in another color. But I want to try to get some of this black in there as negative space. So I'm using a bit less. I'm using 1 less cup of that, and we'll see if that will give me more black background. It may not, because these 2 are such crazy cell makers. It may just explode on the canvas anyway, and I wind up with nothing but cells. I wouldn't be mad at that, but that's what I'm going for here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by putting 2 ounces, oh, that was a little bit more than 2. Okay, no worries. Into my cup. And I'm going to lay down my base coat. And the reason that we lay down a base coat is because you want the paint to slide around on your canvas. If you pour your paint onto a dry canvas, something has to stick to that canvas, and so it's going to be the paint that comes out of your cup. And then that paint is going to roll over top of itself and continue to cover, and you're going to lose everything that's on your edges of your puddle. And sometimes, especially in straight pours, that is where some of the coolest stuff happens. And you don't want to risk losing that. So if you are using a base coat, you want your base coat to be the same thickness or slightly thinner than your poured paints, never thicker. Blooms are a completely different thing. That's not what we're talking about here. That is a whole different animal. But you want your paints to be thinner, or your background, your base coat, you want your base coat to be thinner or the same as your poured paints. If it's thicker, it will actually fight the paint that you're trying to tilt, and it'll wind up getting little wobbles in the edge because your base coat is too thick. And we don't want that. Another reason to use a base coat is because it helps you to keep your composition. So if you have something cool going on, you have a lot more control over it than if you didn't have a base coat down there helping it to slide around and stretch as opposed to roll over top of itself. And the reason that I use this particular, generally I use for my background is what is going to be in this cup, and base coat, I generally make those the same color so that if I wind up with bubbles in my base coat that make their way through the tilted paint, the stretched paint, it won't stand out. If I were using a white base coat right now, and there's no white in this pour, and white cells were to pop up in this, it would ruin it for me. So that's why I do the same color base coat as background. All right, my base coat is down. I'm going to torch this base coat to get rid of any of the bubbles that I may have caused. And I'll likely torch it again before I tilt because they will continue to rise up to the top. I may not see it now, but in 3 minutes, I'll see it. All right. Always double check your consistency before you load up your cup, just to make sure, because the sauce can thicken upon standing. I'm going to come in with the copper first, pouring from up high. I want them to sink. I want my cell makers to sink. I love these Fluid Art Company, these little spatulas. I can get all of the paint out of this cup. And they mix really quickly too. Okay, now for the gold. Again, pouring up high, allowing them to churn. Okay, and now I'm going to take what is left of this black paint and I'm pouring it over top. I do find that when your paints start rising to the top, especially these cell makers, they're gonna wanna pop back up to the top. I mean, you saw originally when I poured it, it sank and then it starts coming back up. You can see the cells are already popping up in there on top of the black that I just put in. So I find that that helps to just give me a little more cell action on the edges, whereas I might have had big blocks of copper on the edge. I might still, but this will give me a little more definition, hopefully. All right, let's make a mess, shall we? Don't know if I mentioned, this is a 16 by 20 gallery wrapped canvas. And I'm using 8 cups. You know what, I'm gonna do a little bit of swirl action. But 8 ounces in my pour cup for a 16 by 20 canvas. Oh, I had way too much coffee today. So I went and looked at an apartment today and I fell in love with it and I think I got it. So I'm very excited about that. 99% sure that we're solid. Never 100% sure until I have keys in hand, you know. So I had a lot of coffee today. Ooh. Very shaky, very shaky. Okay. Like a half point off for that dismount. Definitely have better luck on the dismount with my measuring cup than with a regular cup. Okay, so you can see that the copper is dominating this right now. But we are going to let the pour puddle percolate. And what's going to happen is more of these gold cells are probably going to pop up. Let's give this a torch. Oh, I forgot to do another torch before I poured. That's all right. So this technique does create a lot of air bubbles because it's churning air in it when you are pouring it into the cup. It is churning air into it as you are pouring onto the canvas. So you do wind up with a lot of bubbles. And as it sits, more of these cells will pop up. I could tilt now and still get gold cells, but they're going to be what I call pop-up cells. Some people call them pearl cells. They're generally pretty uniform in size. But if I wait, if I am patient and I allow this to sit and do what it do, and I let these cells pop up and they'll start to expand a bit and get to that pearl cell or pop-up cell size, and then I stretch them, and that's when the cool boulder action happens. That's when you get those really funky 3D looking effects. So when it comes to straight pours, patience is your best friend. I know it's hard. You know, if you need to walk away, if you need to set a timer for 5 minutes, then do that. If that's what it takes to make you wait, then absolutely do whatever it takes. But you will be glad that you did. The first straight pour where I got boulder cells was video number 16, and my torch wasn't working. And so the pour puddle just sat and sat. And by the time I finally came back to it and got my torch working, it was full of cells. The whole puddle was a bunch of yellow and magenta cells. And then when I stretched it out, all of those cells kind of turned into boulders, and it looked like the eye of Sauron or some kind of sunflower. Really cool effect. The first straight pour was number 15, and I was just trying to go for a gradient of colors, and I went a little thin thinking that they would blend together, but that actually wound up being the first straight pour that I did. I mean, it may not be the first straight pour that was ever made, but that's what I named it when I discovered it. But that gave me more of the pop-up cell action, because the cells started popping up as I was tilting it. So you can see there are more cells popping up. And I could fast forward through this part or just cut this part out for you. But I do think it's really important that people see and how long this is sitting to get the effects that I get. You know, if I were to just fast forward through those 7 minutes and be like, okay, here we go, you may not do that. You may just start tilting. You know, another reason that I don't speed up my tilting, because I want you to see how slow I'm actually tilting. I like going into things armed with as much information as possible. And so for me, showing you guys how to do stuff like that is full transparency to me, is for you to see exactly how I'm doing this. I'm not hiding anything or speeding anything up or any of that. Okay. I could let this sit longer. I could. But I think I'm okay with just having some of the gold boulder cells instead of waiting for it to fill up and then stretching it out and getting too much. I wouldn't mind if some of them were just pop-up cells, so then I would maintain some of that contrast with the black background. Okay, so it looks like this corner is kind of stretching that way already, as is this one. Maybe I'll go this way first. All right, that's what I'll do. Tilting very slowly. And it's always good to be mindful of the weight of your paint. That is going to help you maintain control of your composition and what is getting tilted, what is not. You can get pretty precise as far as tilting things off if you are keeping an eye on the weight of your paint, and that's where it's moving fastest. Okay. And now I will bring the weight of the paint back to center. Oh, I mean, this copper is so beautiful. Oh, I kind of don't want to tilt it off, but I have a lot of paint on this canvas, so it needs to happen. Do bring the weight of your paint back to center before you change directions. That will help to prevent the wobbly effect that you can get. And if you watched my last painting, you know how much I hate that. I still don't know how I was tilting too fast on that. Okay, again, bringing the weight of my paint back to center. The slower you move this paint, the more control you will keep over your composition. And if you're whipping this paint around too quickly, you may just explode your cells. That can happen too. And you can see when you use the weight of the paint to push the other paints around, you can almost make a corner. Almost. Perpendicular lines, but not a right angle. Okay, and again, bringing the weight of the paint back to center. I'm starting to get some wobbles. Am I losing my mojo? Why is it doing that? Whew. So how y'all doing? Talk amongst yourselves. The last corner always seems to take forever. Come on now. You can do it. Well, I'm really liking what's happening. I do hope that I get to keep some of that black in there because it is super dramatic. I may have to even do less next time if that doesn't work. Okay. And again, bringing the weight of the paint back to center. The more I move and stretch this, the more cells are likely to pop up. That is just what happens in straight pours. As that top layer of the black, I should say, as that black is stretched, it gets thinner and it allows for the paints underneath to slide on up. All right. I do want to get a bit of color on this corner. No bikini edges. There we go. Okay. So now I'm just going to scrape the bottom of the canvas. This is something you don't want to skip for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want drips hanging off your painting as they dry, but also as that paint is dripping, it will pull the paint that is on the side of the canvas with it. And sometimes you can wind up where it kind of breaks up a bit, or you wind up pulling the paint from the top of the canvas because it's still pulling it. So you just want to get those drips, and I would let it sit for maybe 5 minutes and come back and do it again. And if you keep doing it and you notice that one side has drips and the other sides don't, that means your canvas isn't level. That's a pro tip for you right there. Okay, I'm going to let this sit and do what it does. I would be totally okay if it didn't do anything. If it just stayed the way it was. I know it's not going to. I'm going to get more cells popping up. But hopefully I get to keep a lot of that black because that's what I really want in there. I want that contrast. It makes that drama. But I really like the cells that are happening. And I'm going to let this sit and do what it do. And then I will be back. I'll bring you in for a close-up. Back in a few. Okay, here it is. Yay. Got to keep some of that black in there. The gold did not take over completely. Lots of drama, lots of contrast, loads of bling. I am very, very happy with how this piece turned out. No complaints here. There we go. That's the color it should be. It keeps changing on me. If you watch my videos, you know that my camera keeps fluctuating because the metallics confuse the camera. If I pull out, will it correct? Okay, that is the color. That's what it looks like. Whenever I get in close, the color changes on me. But, some nice boulder cell action going on. Minimal amount of pop-up cells. Pleased with that. I just didn't want many of them in this piece. But there it is. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you did, please do slap that like button like it owes you money. And be sure that you subscribe if you are subscribed and you're not getting notifications. Click that bell and make sure you click all notifications, because sometimes it'll just send it to you once in a while. Do check out the description box below for links to my PayPal tip jar if you feel so inclined. Always appreciate it, definitely not expect it. Check out all of the affiliate links. DecoArt, which is the paint that I'm using to make these magical cells. I am now a DecoArt affiliate, as well as Blick and Amazon and Arteza. And if you are purchasing those paints off the internet, do please use those links. I will receive a small commission at no additional cost to you. That is going to help me out tremendously to stay stocked up in paint, so I can keep bringing you the fresh content and groovy experiments. Also, in the description box, you will find the link to my website, GinaDeLuca.net, where you can find my art and music and fluid art inspiration cards for sale. And of course, the cards are also on Amazon. And last but certainly not least, join our Facebook group, Go Make Some Art. You can find that link in the description box as well. You can post your masterpieces, ask your questions, get some inspiration. Good time had by most, because it is the internet. All right, everyone. That is it for me for today. I hope y'all have a beautiful day. Now go make some art.